A hardened Marine, trained for combat, never expected his greatest battle would happen on a quiet street corner. When he spotted a terrified little girl pointing at a bus, her tiny body trembling, he knew something was horribly wrong. What he did next would leave an entire town in awe and change both their lives forever. This is a story of courage, instinct, and the unexpected heroes among us. Before we dive into this incredible moment, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us of the power of human connection, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The bus stop. The afternoon sun hung low over Cedar Ridge, Ohio, casting long shadows across Maple Street as the town buzzed with its usual rhythm. Parents hurried to meet their children after school. Shopkeepers waved at familiar faces, and the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant fireplaces. It was a kind of ordinary day where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Lance Corporal Daniel Reyes, Danny to those who knew him, stood at the crosswalk, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn leather jacket. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet intensity of a man who had seen too much too young. His dark eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the street-out habit, a reflex honed by 2 tours overseas. Since returning stateside, he had struggled to adjust to the stillness of civilian life. The sounds of cars, laughter, and rustling leaves were nothing compared to the echoes of gunfire that still haunted his dreams. He was supposed to be meeting his sister for coffee, another attempt at normalcy, but she was running late as usual. So he waited, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the restless energy humming beneath his skin. Then he saw her, a little girl, no more than 6 years old, stood frozen on the sidewalk just a few feet away. Her blonde curls were pulled into a messy ponytail, and her small fingers clutched a ragged stuffed bunny. Her blue eyes were wide, locked onto the yellow school bus rolling to a stop in front of her. Danny frowned. Something was off. The bus wasn't at the usual school pickup spot. It was too early, and there were no other kids around. The girl, Emily, he would later learn her name, didn't move toward the bus. Instead, her tiny hand lifted, her finger trembling as she pointed at the driver. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Danny's instincts flared to life. He took a step closer, his gaze darting between the girl and the bus. The driver, a middle-aged man with a gaunt face and hollow eyes, stared straight ahead, his grip tight on the steering wheel. The door hissed open, but Emily didn't climb aboard. She took a shaky step back. A cold knot formed in Danny's stomach. This isn't right. The driver turned his head slowly, his gaze sliding toward Emily. A smile stretched across his face, too wide, too forced. "Come on, sweetheart," he called, his voice sickly sweet. "You don't want to miss your ride." Emily shook her head violently, her entire body trembling now. Danny didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and dropped to one knee beside her. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. "You okay?" She didn't look at him. Her wide eyes stayed fixed on the bus driver. The man's smile faltered. His fingers twitched against the gear shift. Danny's pulse pounded in his ears. He had seen that look before, the predatory patience of someone who knew how to wait for their moment. "Emily," a woman's voice cut through the tension. Danny turned to see a frazzled young woman rushing toward them, her work lanyard still swinging around her neck. "Emily, baby, I'm so sorry I'm late." She skidded to a stop, her gaze flicking between her daughter and the bus. Confusion flickered across her face. "What's going on?" The bus driver's expression darkened. Without a word, he yanked the door shut. The engine roared. Tires screeched as the bus lurched forward, speeding away down the street. Emily finally tore her eyes away, burying her face in her mother's side with a choked sob. Danny stood slowly, watching the bus disappear around the corner, his jaw clenched. That wasn't just a strange encounter. That was a near miss. And he knew, somehow, deep in his bones, that this wasn't over. The chase. Danny didn't think. He moved. The bus was already halfway down the block, its engine growling as it picked up speed. Without hesitation, Danny broke into a sprint, his boots pounding against the pavement. His muscles burned, but the adrenaline coursing through him drowned out the pain. He had run through worse. He had survived worse. "Hey! Stop that bus!" he shouted, but the driver either didn't hear him or didn't care. The vehicle swung sharply around the corner, its tires squealing against the asphalt. Behind him, Emily's mother, Mia. He remembered her name from the lanyard, let out a sharp cry. "Emily, what's wrong? Who was that man?" But Danny didn't stop to explain. He couldn't. Something about the driver's cold stare, the way Emily had frozen in fear, it set off every alarm in his head. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was something darker. He rounded the corner just in time to see the bus turn again, this time onto a quieter side street lined with aging storefronts. Danny pushed himself harder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He fumbled for his phone, fingers slipping as he dialed 911. "Emergency services, what's your—" "There's a kid in danger." Danny cut in, his voice rough with exertion. "Yellow school bus. Driver just tried to take a little girl." License plate. He squinted, but the bus was too far ahead. "I don't have the plate." Heading east on Willow toward downtown. Driver's a white male, 40s, thin. "Send units now." The dispatcher responded, but Danny barely heard her. His focus narrowed to the bus, to the flash of Emily's small face pressed against the rear window. Her tiny hand splayed against the glass, her mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear. His stomach twisted. She's not supposed to be on that bus. A memory flashed. His unit in Fallujah, a child caught in the crossfire. The same helpless fury burned in his chest now. He wouldn't let history repeat itself. Not here. Not today. The bus swerved again, cutting through a red light. Horns blared as cars slammed on their brakes. Danny darted between them, ignoring the shouts of angry drivers. He was gaining ground, but not fast enough. Then, a break in traffic. The bus slowed as it approached a railroad crossing, its warning lights flashing. The crossing arms began to descend. Danny poured on the speed. He was 10 feet away when the driver glanced in the rear-view mirror. Their eyes locked. The man's lips curled into a smirk. And then the bus lurched forward, barreling through the crossing just as the arms came down. "No!" Danny skidded to a halt, his chest heaving. The train whistle screamed in the distance. He couldn't follow. But he wasn't done yet. Panting, he turned to the nearest store, a mechanic's garage. A burly man in oil-stained coveralls stood outside, watching the scene with wide eyes. "Keys!" Danny demanded, striding toward him. "Now!" The mechanic blinked. "What?" Danny didn't have time for explanations. He grabbed the man's arm, his grip iron. "That bus just took a kid. I need a vehicle. Now." Something in his voice, the raw command, the barely leashed violence, made the mechanic nod. He tossed Danny the keys to a beat-up Ford pickup idling by the pumps. Danny was inside before the man could change his mind. The engine roared to life. The train thundered past, but he barely registered it. His mind was already calculating the bus's likely route, where it might stop, how to cut it off. He peeled onto the road, tires screeching. Somewhere ahead, Emily was trapped with a man who had no business near children, and Danny Reyes was coming for him. The unraveling. The pickup's engine screamed as Danny wrenched the steering wheel, swerving onto a parallel street. His knuckles were white, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. The bus had vanished from sight, but he knew these roads, knew the shortcuts, the dead ends, the places a vehicle that size could hide. His mind raced. Why Emily? Was this random? Or had that sick bastard been watching her? A flash of yellow in his peripheral vision. The bus was 2 blocks over, turning into the parking lot of an abandoned grocery store. Danny slammed the gas, the truck lurching forward. He didn't bother with subtlety. He aimed straight for the chain-link fence surrounding the lot and plowed through it with metallic shriek. The bus sat idle, engine still running. No movement, no sign of Emily. Danny was out of the truck before it fully stopped, his combat instincts screaming at him to clear every angle. He approached low and fast, using the scattered dumpsters for cover. The bus windows were fogged, making it impossible to see inside. Then a whimper, high-pitched, terrified. Emily. Danny's blood turned to ice. He lunged to the bus door just as it burst open. The driver stumbled out, wild-eyed, one arm clamped around Emily's waist. She kicked and thrashed, her screams muffled by the man's meaty hand over her mouth. "Back off," the driver snarled, pressing a box cutter to Emily's throat. The blade glinted in the afternoon sun. "I'll do it. I swear to God I'll do it." Danny froze. His training kicked in. Assess, adapt, act. The man was desperate, sloppy. His grip on Emily was too loose. His stance unbalanced. But one wrong move, and that blade would find its mark. "Easy," Danny said, his voice calm despite the fire in his veins. He slowly raised his hands. "Nobody has to get hurt. Just let her go." The driver's laugh was jagged, unhinged. "You think I'm stupid? I know what happens now." His eyes darted toward the distant wail of sirens. "But I'm not going back. Not again." Again, the word clicked in Danny's mind. This wasn't his first time. A flicker of movement behind the bus. Mia had followed, her face streaked with tears. She clutched her phone to her chest, her lips moving in a silent prayer. Danny needed a distraction. Now, he locked eyes with Emily. "Remember your bunny, kid?" he said, deliberately casual. "The one with the floppy ear?" Her terrified gaze flickered in recognition. The driver frowned. "What the hell are you?" Emily bit down hard on his hand. The man howled, his grip loosening just enough. Danny moved like lightning, one sharp kick to the knee, a brutal elbow to the throat. The box cutter clattered to the ground as the driver crumpled, gasping. Danny yanked Emily away, shoving her toward Mia. "Run." The driver scrambled for the blade, but Danny was faster. He drove his boot into the man's ribs, once, twice, until he curled into a whimpering ball. Only then did Danny step back, his breath ragged, his hands shaking with fury. It was over. Mia sobbed as she crushed Emily against her chest. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights painting the cracked asphalt. But Danny wasn't celebrating. He stared down at the moaning predator at his feet, a single thought burning through him. How many others were there before her? The aftermath. The police cars screeched into the parking lot, surrounding the scene in a half-circle of flashing lights. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred together in Danny's adrenaline-filled ears. He stood motionless, his body still thrumming with the remnants of combat readiness, watching as two officers dragged the bus driver to his feet. The man's face was bloody, his lips curled into a sneer even as he winced in pain. "She's lying," he spat, his voice raw from Danny's earlier strike. "I didn't do anything wrong. She got on the wrong bus, that's all." Danny's hands clenched into fists. The lie was pathetic, transparent, but it still made his stomach twist. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered sergeant with a salt-and-pepper mustache, approached Danny. "You the one who called it in?" Danny nodded. The sergeant eyed him, his stance, his scars, the way his gaze kept flicking back to Emily. "Military?" "Marines." A knowing look passed between them. The sergeant exhaled sharply. "All right, we'll need your statement. But first..." He turned toward Mia and Emily, who were being wrapped in blankets by a paramedic. Emily's tiny frame was still shaking, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. Danny forced himself to take a slow breath. The immediate danger was over. Emily was safe. That was what mattered. But as he watched Mia stroke her daughter's hair, whispering reassurances through her own tears, something cold settled in his chest. This shouldn't have happened. And worse. It could have been so much worse. The interrogation room. The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed voices. Danny sat in a cramped interview room, recounting the events in clipped, precise sentences. He didn't mention the way his pulse had roared in his ears when he saw the blade at Emily's throat. Didn't mention the way his hands had trembled after. The detective across from him, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with a coffee stain on her blouse, scribbled notes, pausing only to push a lukewarm cup of coffee toward him. "You acted fast," she said. "Most people wouldn't have noticed something was off." Danny's jaw tightened. "Most people aren't trained to look for threats." She studied him for a long moment. "You think this was planned?" "I think that man knew what he was doing." A knock at the door interrupted them. The sergeant from earlier stepped in, his expression grim. "You were right to be suspicious," he said, dropping a file onto the table. "Guy's name is Carl Dobbs. Worked as a substitute bus driver for the district until last year. Got fired after a parent complained about inappropriate behavior." Danny's stomach turned. "And they just let him go?" The detective sighed. No charges were filed. The complaint was vague, no proof. He slipped through the cracks. Silence settled over the room. Danny stared at the file, at the mugshot of Carl Dobbs staring back with empty eyes. This wasn't just a near miss. It was a failure, a systemic one, outside the station. Night had fallen by the time Danny stepped outside. The air was colder now, biting against his skin. He barely noticed. Mia was waiting for him on the steps, her arms wrapped around herself. Emily was asleep in the back of a social worker's car, exhausted from the ordeal. "You saved her," Mia said, her voice raw. "I don't even know how to—" She broke off, swallowing hard. Danny shook his head. "You don't have to thank me, but I do." Her eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. I thought she was just being shy about a new driver. I didn't listen. I didn't see it." The guilt in her voice was crushing. Danny knew that weight, knew how it could bury you, if you let it. "This isn't on you," he said quietly. "It's on him, and the people who let him walk away the first time." Mia wiped at her cheeks. "What happens now?" Danny looked back at the police station, at the glowing windows where Carl Dobbs was being processed. "Now," he said, "we make sure he never gets near another kid again. The unseen wounds." The Cedar Ridge Gazette hit doorsteps the next morning with a bold headline: "Local hero Marine stops child abduction." Danny's face, a grainy photo from his service days, stared back on the front page. He crumpled the paper in his hands before tossing it onto the diner counter. Across from him, his sister, Sarah, stirred her coffee with a sigh. You knew this was coming. Small towns talk. Danny grunted. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's terrified face pressed against the bus window, heard the rasp of Carl Dobbs' voice. "I'll do it. I swear to God I'll do it." The diner's TV played a muted news segment showing Dobbs' arraignment. Handcuffed, head bowed, the man looked smaller now, pathetic. But Danny knew better. Predators perfected the art of playing harmless. Sarah followed his gaze. "They're saying he might get bail." Danny's coffee cup cracked against the saucer. "He won't. You sound sure." "I am." Because if the system failed again, Danny had other plans. The thought should have disturbed him. It didn't. The safe house. Mia had taken Emily to her sister's farm outside town, a temporary refuge from the reporters camped on their doorstep. Danny found them in the barn, where Emily sat on a hay bale, methodically braiding the mane of an ancient palomino. She looked up when he entered. No smile, but no fear either. Just a quiet watchfulness that made his chest ache. Mia emerged from the tack room, her eyes red-rimmed. "She hasn't spoken since it happened," she whispered. "The therapist says it's shock, but—" Danny crouched to Emily's eye level. "Hey, kid." He pulled something from his pocket, a chocolate bar, slightly melted. "Heard these are good for scary days." Emily stared at it. Then, with trembling fingers, she took the candy and whispered, "He smelled like cigarettes." Mia clapped a hand over her mouth. Danny kept his voice steady. "Yeah, bad guys often do." Emily peeled the wrapper slowly. "Is he gone?" "Not yet." Danny chose his next words carefully. "But people like him? They count on good folks looking away. We won't do that anymore." A beat. Then Emily broke off a piece of chocolate and offered it to him. It was the first thing she'd shared since the abduction. The call. His phone buzzed as he left the farm. Unknown number. Reyes. A woman's voice sharp. "Lieutenant Daniels, County DA's office. We need to talk. Dobbs' lawyer is pushing for a psych eval. Claims his client was confused and disoriented." Danny's grip tightened. He knew exactly what he was doing. "I believe you, but the judge needs more than one victim's testimony to deny bail." A pause. "We think there are others." The pieces clicked. The complaint from last year, The parent who came forward vanished, moved out of state, supposedly, but I have a hunch they were pressured. Daniels exhaled. Problem is, scared people stay scared. Unless someone like you convinces them otherwise. Danny watched the sunset bleed across the fields. He knew what she was asking, knew the ghost that would dredge up, but Emily's voice echoed in his mind. Is he gone? Send me the files, he said. The vanishing witness. The address on the file led Danny to a boarded-up duplex on the outskirts of Cleveland, its porch sagging under the weight of neglect. According to the records, this was where Tessa Morales, the mother who'd filed the original complaint against Carl Dobbs, had lived before disappearing. Danny knocked anyway. The door creaked open to reveal a haggard man in his 60s, reeking of whiskey and stale sweat. Yeah, looking for Tessa Morales, Danny said, keeping his voice neutral. The man's laugh turned into a cough. Ain't nobody here by that name. Danny held up the photo from the case file. A young woman with defiant eyes, clutching a little boy's hand. She lived here 2 years ago. Something flickered in the man's gaze. Fear? Guilt? He started to shut the door. Like I said, you got the wrong. Danny's boot wedged in the frame. Her son got on Dobbs' bus. Same as Emily Carter. The name landed like a punch. The man's face drained of color. Jesus Christ. You're that Marine. He glanced over Danny's shoulder, as if expecting watchers. Look, I don't know where Tessa went, but she didn't move. She ran. The burn file. Back in his truck, Danny spread the documents across the passenger seat. The official report claimed Tessa withdrew her complaint due to personal reasons, but the dates didn't add up. She'd vanished a week before the withdrawal letter was filed. And then there was the boy. No school records. No pediatric visits. Like he'd been erased. Danny's phone buzzed. A text from Lieutenant Daniels. Got a lead. Meet me at the quarry. 9 p.m. Come alone. The quarry was an isolated spot, 10 miles west of town. Too isolated. Danny typed back. Who gave you this lead? No response. Ambush. He went anyway, but not blind. His Glock rested heavy against his ribs as he parked at the quarry's edge. The moon cast long shadows across the gravel. Daniel's car sat empty, driver's door ajar. Danny drew his weapon. Lieutenant. A rustle, then a whimper. He found her slumped behind a stack of tires, blood soaking through her blouse. Her breath came in wet gasps. I'll run. Footsteps crunched behind him. Danny spun, just as the first bullet grazed his shoulder. The shooter emerged from the darkness, a hulking figure in a sheriff's deputy uniform. Not local. Danny didn't recognize him, but the man moved with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Should have stayed a hero, Reyes, the deputy sneered, raising his sidearm. Now you're just loose ends. Danny dug behind a bulldozer as another shot rang out. His wounded shoulder burned, but his mind was eerily clear. This wasn't random. Someone had sent this man to tie up the past, and Danny was done running from it. Blood and truth. The metallic tang of gunpowder hung thick in the quarry air as Danny pressed his back against the bulldozer's rusted flank. His shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed him, the fabric of his shirt sticky with blood. Across the gravel clearing, the deputy advanced with the slow confidence of a man who enjoyed the hunt. Lieutenant Daniels gasped at Danny's feet, her fingers clutching at his ankle. He's not alone, she managed, her voice barely audible over the ringing in Danny's ears. As if on cue, a second set of footsteps crunched through the gravel, lighter, quicker. A woman's voice cut through the darkness. Drop the gun, deputy. Danny risked a glance. A slender figure in a leather jacket stood at the edge of the quarry. SIG Sauer trained steadily on the deputy's head. Even in the dim moonlight, Danny recognized the sharp angles of Tessa Morales' face from the case file. The deputy froze. You're supposed to be dead. Tessa's laugh was ice. You missed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the deputy spun, firing wildly. Danny lunged. His body collided with the deputy's just as the gun went off again. They hit the ground hard, Danny's injured shoulder screaming in protest. The deputy snarled, driving an elbow into Danny's ribs. Pain exploded through his side. But he held on, twisting the man's wrist until the gun clattered to the ground. A shadow loomed over them. Tessa pressed her boot to the deputy's throat. "Who sent you?" The deputy's lips curled into a bloody smile. "You'll find out soon enough." Then his body jerked. A wet cough bubbled past his lips. His eyes rolled back. Danny recoiled as foam spilled from the man's mouth. "Cyanide capsule," he muttered. Son of a bitch was prepared. Silence settled over the quarry, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. Tessa holstered her gun and knelt beside her. "We need to move. They'll send others." Danny studied Tessa, the way her hands trembled even as her voice stayed steady, the faded scar along her jawline. This wasn't just a frightened mother on the run. This was a woman who'd been fighting her own war. "Where's your son?" he asked. Her gaze flickered to the trees. "Safe. For now." Danny nodded toward the dead deputy. "Who's they?" Tessa's jaw tightened. "The same people who made sure Carl Dobbs kept driving that bus. The ones who made me disappear." She yanked open the deputy's collar, revealing a tattoo beneath, a snake coiled around a shield. "Recognize this?" Danny's blood ran cold. He'd seen that symbol before, on a dossier in Fallujah, on the wrist of a contractor who'd smuggled weapons to insurgents. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a syndicate. The Snake's Nest. The safe house was a crumbling hunting cabin deep in the Allegheny National Forest, its walls lined with maps, newspaper clippings, and strings of red yarn connecting them like a spider's web. Tessa moved through the dim space with practiced efficiency, tossing Danny a first aid kit before crouching to check Lieutenant Daniel's pulse. "She needs a hospital," Danny said, pressing gauze to his bleeding shoulder. "And walk into another ambush?" Tessa shook her head. "They own half the cops in 3 counties. She jerked her chin toward a photograph pinned to the wall, a group of men in suits shaking hands at a charity gala. One face was circled in black marker, Mayor Richard Vaughn. Danny's stomach dropped. He knew that face. The mayor had shaken his hand at a veterans event last year, all polished smiles and empty gratitude. "You're saying the mayor is involved in child trafficking?" Tessa's laugh was hollow. "He's not at the top, just another puppet." She flipped open a ledger, its pages filled with coded entries. This is their shipment log. Dates, locations, and these? She tapped a column of initials. Buyers. Danny's vision blurred. One entry leaped out. CRE 6/15. Cedar Ridge. Emily. His hands shook. They'd been targeting her. A groan came from the cot. Daniel's eyelids fluttered. "Reyes, the files," she rasped. "Sheriff's evidence locker, blue envelope." Tessa exchanged a glance with Danny. "They'll have torn the station apart by now." "Then we move first." Danny stood, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "But we're not leaving her." Tessa hesitated, then nodded toward a back room. "My son's hiding place is room for 2. Behind a false panel in the closet, a narrow tunnel led to a root cellar. A small boy slept curled on a mattress, his arms wrapped around a teddy bear. The sight punched through Danny's rage. This was why Tessa had survived, why she'd fought. As they carried Daniels down, the boy stirred. "Mama?" Tessa brushed his hair back. "Just a little longer. Me, Joe, then we'll go somewhere safe." If such a place exists, Danny thought grimly, the sheriff's station. 3:17 a.m. The parking lot was deserted except for a lone deputy, snoring at the front desk. Danny slipped into fire exit, Tessa covering his 6. The evidence locker was a graveyard of sealed boxes. The blue envelope was tucked behind a stack of drug bust inventories, its contents spilling out as Danny grabbed it. Photos of Dobbs with Vaughn, bank statements, and a list of license plates. One matched the deputy from the quarry. Another belonged to Emily's pediatrician. Danny's blood turned to ice. They were everywhere. Tessa hissed a warning. Headlights swept across the lot. They barely made it to the trees before 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt. Men in tactical gear poured out. Not cops. Private security. Danny counted 6. Maybe more. Tessa cocked her pistol. "You take left." The first shot rang out as they opened fire. "The devil you know." The gunfire sent crows scattering into the pre-dawn sky as Danny and Tessa retreated deeper into the woods, the blue envelope burning a hole in Danny's jacket. Branches whipped at their faces, their breaths coming in ragged bursts. Behind them, shouts echoed, the tactical team fanning out, flashlights cutting through the trees. Tessa grabbed Danny's arm, yanking him behind a moss-covered boulder. "They'll have the roads blocked," she whispered. "We need to split up." Danny shook his head. "They're hunting you. That envelope ties Vaughn to Dobbs. I'll be bait." Her eyes flashed in the dim light. "And then what? You're not even armed properly." She shoved a spare pistol into his hands, a compact Glock 26. "Take it. And this." She pressed a burner phone into his palm. "Memorize the number. Call when you're clear." Before he could argue, she melted into the shadows. Danny waited 3 heartbeats, then burst into a sprint, deliberately snapping twigs underfoot. A flashlight beam swung his way. Movement. Northeast. He grinned grimly and ran harder. Sarah's doorstep. The sun was rising when Danny stumbled onto his sister's porch, his shoulder throbbing, his clothes streaked with dirt and blood. Sarah opened the door, her face draining of color. "Jesus, Danny." Inside. Now. She dragged him into the kitchen, already reaching for her nursing kit. As she cleaned his wound, he told her everything: the ledger, the mayor, the pediatrician. Her hand stilled when he mentioned Emily's name in the files. "That's not all," she said quietly. "I got a call yesterday from Child Services. They asked if I'd taken a foster kid temporarily, a 6-year-old boy." Danny's spine went rigid. When? Tonight. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap. Danny was already on his feet when a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Aunt Sarah? I'm thirsty." A boy with tousled brown hair rubbed his eyes in the doorway. Danny's breath caught. He'd seen that face before in Tessa's photos. Her son. The boy blinked up at him. "You're the Marine. Mama said you'd help us." Sarah's grip on Danny's arm turned vice-like. "Danny, what the hell is going on?" The answer came in the screech of tires outside. The trap springs. Danny peered through the blinds. 2 unmarked vans idled at the curb. No lights. No sirens. "Back door," he ordered, shoving the Glock into Sarah's hands. "Take him to the old Thompson barn. Wait for my call." Sarah's voice shook. "What about you?" He pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you, sis." Then he stepped onto the porch, hands raised. A man in a black windbreaker emerged from the van. Not tactical gear this time. Something worse. A badge glinted on his belt. "FBI. Daniel Reyes?" The agent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk about your involvement with Tessa Morales." Danny kept his face blank, even as his mind raced. This wasn't an arrest. It was a kidnapping dressed up as law enforcement, and he was walking right into it. The interrogation. The van reeked of stale coffee and antiseptic. Danny sat handcuffed to a bolted-down chair, watching the fake FBI agent, Special Agent Harris, pace the cramped space. The other man, a silent brute with knuckle tattoos, leaned against the wall, staring at Danny like he was already dead. Harris stopped pacing. "Let's skip the bullshit. Where's Tessa Morales?" Danny kept his voice flat. "Don't know who that is." A fist slammed into his ribs. Pain exploded through his side, but he swallowed the grunt. The brute smiled. Harris sighed, like this was all just tedious. "See, here's the problem. We know you met her at the quarry. We know you have the envelope." He leaned in, his breath hot against Danny's ear. "And we know your sister is hiding her kid." Danny's pulse spiked, but his face stayed blank. They were bluffing. Sarah was smarter than that. She'd have gotten the boy to safety. Harris pulled out a phone and played a video. Sarah's living room, empty. The camera panned to the kitchen window, the Thompson barn visible in the distance. A shadow moved inside. "Damn it," Harris smirked. "Here's what's going to happen. You call Tessa, set up a meet, or my associate pays your sister a visit." He nodded to the brute, who pulled out a hunting knife, and he likes his work. Danny exhaled slowly. Then, He headbutt Harris square in the nose. The crack of cartilage was satisfying. Harris howled, blood gushing down his chin. The brute lunged, but Danny was ready. He hooked the chair legs around the man's ankles, sending them both crashing to floor. The knife skittered away. Danny twisted, grabbing the blade with his cuffed hands. A quick jerk, and the plastic restraint split. Harris was scrambling for his gun when Danny drove the knife into his thigh. The scream was cut short by a gunshot from outside. The van's doors flew open. Tessa stood silhouetted in daylight, her SIG smoking. "Took you long enough," Danny muttered. She tossed him a pistol. "We have bigger problems." Through the open doors, Danny saw them. 3 black SUVs speeding toward Sarah's house. The barn. Sarah had barricaded the barn doors with a tractor, but it wouldn't hold forever. The boy, Lucas, clung to her leg, his small face pale with terror. Danny and Tess arrived just as the first SUV screeched to a halt. Gunfire erupted. Danny shoved Sarah and Lucas behind a hay bale, returning fire. Tessa took out 2 men with chilling precision before her gun clicked empty. "We're pinned," she shouted. Danny scanned the barn. Old tools. Gas cans. No way out. Then his eyes landed on the old irrigation pipes running along the back wall. Sarah, the tunnels. Her eyes widened in understanding. The farm's original owners had built escape routes during Prohibition. As the SUVs disgorged more men, Danny pried up the floorboards. "Go. Now!" Sarah hesitated only a second before lowering Lucas into the darkness. Tessa followed. Danny grabbed the gas cans. He waited until he heard their footsteps fade. Then he struck a match. The fire, the explosion lit up the morning sky. Danny staggered to the cornfield, the heat blistering his back. Behind him, the barn was a roaring inferno. The syndicate's men trapped inside. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Vaughn's panic room. 1 hour. Bring the envelope. Attached was a photo. Mayor Vaughn at his desk, a gun to his head. The hand, holding it, wore a snake and shield ring. The syndicate was turning on its own. Danny smiled grimly and broke into a run. The panic room. The mayor's mansion loomed behind iron gates, its manicured lawns too quiet. No guards. No cameras. A trap so obvious it almost felt insulting. Danny circled to the service entrance, his Glock a familiar weight in his hand. The kitchen door was unlocked, another red flag. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and gun oil. A trail of blood droplets led down the hallway. He followed them to a study lined with leather-bound books. The false panel behind Vaughn's desk was slightly ajar, revealing a steel door. The blood trail ended there. Danny took a breath and kicked it open. The panic room was a cramped, soundproof box. Vaughn slumped in the corner, his designer suit soaked crimson from a gut wound. His eyes fluttered open as Danny entered. "They promise immunity," Vaughn gasped, "said I'd walk if I gave them files." He coughed, flecking his chin with blood. "But the governor, he doesn't leave loose ends." Danny crouched beside him. "Where are they?" Vaughn's trembling hand pointed to a tablet on the desk. The screen showed a live feed, a warehouse by the docks, time-stamped today, 2000 hours. Stacked crates filled the frame, their labels reading medical supplies. But the shadowy figures unloading them carried assault rifles, not stethoscopes. A new voice spoke from the doorway. "I told them you'd come straight here." Danny spun, gun raised, and froze. Captain Elias Holt. His old CO stood framed in the light, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. The snake and shield ring glinted on his finger. 5 years ago, Holt had saved Danny's unit from an ambush. Now he was pointing a Sig Sauer at Danny's chest. "Drop it, Reyes." The pieces clicked. The military precision of the quarry ambush. The traffickers' intel. Holt had been running this from the start. Danny kept his gun steady. "All those kids. Your own men." Holt's smile was glacial. "War is economics. These just happen to be lucrative battlefields." He stepped closer. "But you're a sentimentalist. Always were." Vaughn moaned, reaching for Holt's ankle. "You promised." Holt fired once without looking. The mayor went still. In that split second, Danny lunged. Their struggle was brutal and silent. No room for error in the cramped space. Holt's SIG went off, the bullet embedding in the ceiling. Danny drove a knee into his ribs, hearing something crack. Holt retaliated with a knife-hand strike to Danny's wounded shoulder. White-hot pain blinded him. The tablet clattered to the floor. The feed still showed the warehouse. And now Danny saw something new, a flash of blonde curls in a holding cage. Emily. Holt followed his gaze and laughed. You lose either way, Marine. Danny headbutted him. Bone crunched. Holt staggered back into the panic room's door. Danny slammed it shut, engaging the lock. Holt's enraged scream was muffled through steel. Danny grabbed the tablet and ran. The clock read 1937. 23 minutes to save her. The last stand. The docks reeked of salt and diesel. The warehouse looming like a tomb in the stormy darkness. Danny crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, watching through the tablet's feed as armed men moved between the cages. The children inside were silent. Too silent. Drugged. Or broken. Emily sat curled in a corner. Her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. She was awake. Watching. Waiting. Danny's hands tightened around his Glock. He was outnumbered 12-1. No backup. No plan. Just rage and the ticking clock. Then the lights went out. Every floodlight. Every bulb. Every monitor in the warehouse blinked into darkness. The guards shouted in confusion. A voice crackled in Danny's earpiece. Tessa, power's down. You got 5 minutes before their generator kicks in. He didn't ask how she'd done it. Didn't care. He was already moving. The warehouse. The first guard died without a sound, his neck snapping under Danny's hands. The second took a bullet to the throat. Danny moved like a shadow. Every step precise. Every kill mechanical. He wasn't a man anymore. He was the thing Holt had made him. He found the cage block. 20 children. Maybe more. Their eyes glimmered in the dim emergency lights. Emily saw him first. Danny. Her whisper was barely audible, but it was enough. The locks were heavy duty. No time to pick them. A guard rounded the corner, rifle raised. Danny shot him twice in the chest. The noise would bring the others. Stand back, he ordered the kids. 3 bullets shattered the lock. The door screeched open. Emily launched herself into his arms. The other children hesitated, trembling. Then the generator roared to life. Floodlights blazed. Reyes. Holt's voice boomed over the PA system. You really think it'd be this easy? The warehouse door slammed shut. The trap closes. Holt stood on the catwalk above, flanked by 4 mercenaries. His uniform was pristine, his smile venomous. I hoped you'd make it this far. Needed you to see how pointless this was. Danny shielded Emily with his body. Their children, Holt. Their product. Holt shrugged. And you're a stain I've been ordered to clean. The mercenaries raised their rifles. Danny had 1 bullet left. Then the skylight shattered. Tessa rappelled down, firing mid-descent. 2 mercenaries dropped. The others scattered. Holt lunged for the exit. Danny didn't chase him. He had a promise to keep. The aftermath. Dawn found Danny on the pier, Emily asleep in his arms. The warehouse smoldered behind them, Tessa's explosives having erased the evidence, and the cages. The other children were safe. The syndicate was wounded. Holt was gone. For now. Tessa limped over, her arm bandaged. He'll regroup. They always do. Danny stroked Emily's hair. Then we'll be ready. The waves crashed against the pylons. Somewhere a new fight was brewing. But today they'd won. This fight isn't over. Trafficking rings like this exist in your city, your neighborhood. Stay vigilant. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe for more real-life battles against the darkness. And remember, heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're the ones who refuse to look away.